That one is working.
Going ahead as is. Okay.
Okay.
No change. Okay. I'm waiting for Naz and I'll start. That's good. This was my mad idea.
Definitely.
What be a good idea? We show it off for outtakes.
The joint.
Show off our journals.
Innovation. Yeah.
Okay. I've been told we are now ready. I'm not sure what ready means at the minute, but anyway, welcome everybody to this joint meeting of the Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee and the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel. Just to say, the meeting is being recorded and is available for public viewing. So if anybody in the public is watching, welcome to our meeting. Before we go into all the bits and pieces, I just want to say that having attended Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel for the last 2 to 3 years, and having been chair of CPAC, it seemed to me there was a bit of a sort of slight overlap in some of the areas we talk about, and that CPAC, it not being a decision-making committee, but is one which scrutinises what's going on in the world of children's social care, that it would be helpful to bring the committees together so that children's scrutiny could get a deeper insight into what's going on in really complicated world of looked after children and corporate parenting, and that it would help with the scrutiny and the general overview of this really important area, number one. Number two, that we are all the parents, that's our corporate role. And thirdly, that it would engage more of us in actually understanding how individual this, not only just how individual this work is. Every young person is different. Every young person has their own needs, has their own backstory and so on. But all the agencies that are involved, like we've got Dr. Sender here, who's our doctor from health. We have a nurse, we have all sorts of partners involved in this complicated area that I think may not be apparent to many colleagues. So I'm hoping, first of all, that you find this meeting interesting. You secondly ask questions, and thirdly, that if it does work, that we do it once a year as we do the children and adults overlap. Having said that, we've got very good turnout. Have we had any apologies for absence?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Johnson.
Right. Who's got that little mic?
No,
Oh, right. Oh, right. This one's working. Okay. Okay. We've got no urgent business?
None reported, Chair.
Okay. Any declarations of interest? No any declarations? Okay. In which case we'll move straight to the body of the meeting. And the first report is our regular performance meeting. We have this at every corporate parenting committee, and this is having said how individualised children's social care is, and we have to think about children's people. This is all about the numbers. So, Richard, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Councillor.
And we can hear you, which is brilliant. There's all this new technology, newer technology. Right. Over to you, Richard.
Right, so what I'll do is I'll give a brief run round, a quick run through the report, and then we can have some questions after, if any. Okay. To start with, this report covers almost the entire year 24-25. It had to, because of the timing of it, the year only finished a week ago, so it's the numbers here will almost certainly be nearly the same as the end of year reports when they come out in a few weeks' time. To start with, at the end of February, there were 316 children in care. That has risen slightly by another few this week to a rate of 58 per 10,000. This is fewer in September, but and it is far fewer than we had 2 or 3 years ago. It's been declined in the year, but it's still higher than the London average and is not out of kilter with our statistical neighbours, which are all under other London boroughs. So although it is low for Haringey, it's not low overall. Part of the lower number of looked after children we have is because of the lower number of young unaccompanied asylum seekers. And this has fallen from a few years ago, where it was regularly in its 40s, down to 22 as of the end of February. And of course, the change in number of children looked after is to do with the number starting and the number ceasing, and both those volumes are comparatively low this year. So there's been a smaller turnover of the children. And we look at why children are starting to come into care. There's been a slight shift here this year. Last year, there was an unusually high number of families in acute stress, and this year that has reduced to more normal, I say normal comparative level, because our comparators in the London and national averages. Abuse and neglect is by far the biggest reason for children coming to care, and this is common across everybody else. And the other ones are very low because it's a percentage, they come up and down accordingly. Okay, of the age of very young children in care, we now have 40 children aged 3 or under in our cohort. This is exactly the same as it was the same last year, so that number hasn't changed. In terms of how well we're monitoring the progress of these children, as of the end of February, 88% of children had an up-to-date care plan, and this has improved from 74% in September and 84% last November. So good work from what was Keith's team and Emma's teams, keeping those numbers very in the high 80s. And of the older children, 17 and 18-year-olds, it's 86% had up-to-date plans, which is a good improvement from 79% in September. And PEPs, as we came towards the end of the term, were very good, with over 90% of children had an up-to-date personal education plan. Now, one of the requests from last time was to have more detail on the type of accommodation and the placements we were keeping our young people in. So there's a chart on page 4 that shows the top 3 bands are different types of foster care, with whether it's in-house foster care, independent foster carers, or with family and friends. And then as you go down the list, there's one person currently in a secure unit. So that gives you the breakdown of where they are. In terms of stability of placements, I always say we've always been very strong on stability, as regular readers of this report will know, and this hasn't changed. Only 9% of children who had no episode of care had more than 3 placements in the last 12 months, which comparatively puts us in a good position. And again, as requested last time, the reasons for those changes are set out here in the way we categorise them, and the largest single reason is to implementation of a change to the care plan. So that is moving from maybe a foster placement to a semi-independent placement, or from a mother and baby unit into a foster placement. So those sort of things are planned. And the other one to note is the 5% where it's change in the status of placement only. That is where, from the child's point of view, they haven't moved, but we are now treating it as a new placement, whether that be a long-term foster placement becoming a place for adoption, or a short-term foster placement being agreed as a long-term placement. And the other half of placement stability is children have been in care for a long time, staying in the same place. And again, this is good numbers here, with 57% of children have been in care for more than 2.5 years, being in the same placement for at least 2 of those years. As the councillor just said, this is a partnership operation, and as at the end of February, 90% of children had an up-to-date health assessment, which is very much in line with our statistical neighbours. Dental visits, again, regular readers of this report will know that 88% is very, very good, but it's not high enough still. It's higher than it was before the pandemic when we had real troubles, but we're still working to get that back up to where it needs to be. There are 724 care experienced children on Emma's team's radar. They're split down into different cohorts, and depending on how much time and how much services they're entitled to receive. But all the ones who are aged 21 or under currently have an allocated personal advisor, and 96% of the 19 to 21-year-olds, we have been in touch with the personal advisor recently, so we know we're actually actively supporting those people. For the education, training and employment, 63% of the 17 and 18-year-olds were known and recorded as being in placement, but only 51% of the 19 to 21-year-olds. And the reason for the 19 to 21-year-olds are not in education, training or placement, again, this was brought in as a request as an action from last time, is 22% because of illness, disability, and 9% because of pregnancy or parenting demands. Suitable accommodation is very good, over 90% for the older cohort and 96% for the younger cohort. For EHCPs, we know there's a big overlap of children in care and EHCPs. So it's been very busy this year with 590 requests for EHCPs last year. 369 were issued and 84% were issued within the 20 weeks deadline. So that's good performance. And out of the current looked after children, 68 of them have an active EHCP to support them. The virtual school refresh data on this is published annually and it's due out very, very soon. So I won't spend too much time on that because that's almost out of date. For youth justice, and I know this is coming up in more detail on the agenda later on, but the key figure here is that 22% of the cohort and the youth justice cohort are also children in care. Okay, thank you, Chair. That's a quick whiz through of the report.
Thank you, Richard. And I've done it again. I forgot to do the introductions for the meeting in public. So before we go to questions, I'm going to go this way around. And Felicia, you're going to go first. So Anne and Dion, all the officers, will just do it to go around, including the row at the back there. Go on, Anne. Yeah.
Good evening. Anne Graham, Director of Children's Services. Sorry, Corporate Director. Our titles have changed. Corporate Director of Children's Services. Thank you.
Dion Thomas, and I am the Director of Children's Safeguarding and Social Care.
And which committee you're on? So we've got two committees.
So I'm Councillor Felicia Poku, Councillor for Tottenham Central Ward, and I sit on the Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee.
I'm Councillor Ellen Weston, Councillor for Hornsey Ward, and I'm also a member of the Corporate Parenting Committee.
Councillor Lottie Collett, and I am the Councillor for Woodside, and I'm on the Corporate Parenting Committee.
Hi, I'm Councillor Bromalley. I am Councillor for Bruce Castle Ward and sit on CPAC, Corporate Parenting.
Hello there, this is Marcia Lar Gosling. I'm Councillor for Highgate Ward, and I am part of the Corporate Parenting Committee.
I'm Dr. Paul Sender. I'm designated doctor for looked after children in Haringey from Whittington Health.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sandy Bansall, and I'm the newly appointed Head of Service for Children in Care, Fostering and Placements. First day in the role today, but not new to corporate parenting.
Good evening, I'm Hayley Cook. I'm the Service Manager for Children in Care Placements and VVE.
Councillor Mark Ruscott, South Tottenham Ward. I am sitting on the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Councillor Anna Abela, representing Haringey Ward, and I'm also a member of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Councillor Guinness, I represent South Tottenham Ward, so I'm the chair of Children and Young People's Panel. I sit with that committee.
Councillor George Dunstall, Stroud Green Ward, and I'm also a member of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Hi, I'm Councillor Anna Lawton, and I also sit on the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Hi, I'm Nazir Chowdhury, Democratic Services and Clerk to this meeting. I'd also like to introduce my colleague who has just left his desk at the moment, Christopher Lantis-Liassi. He is also Democratic Services and also Clerk to this committee.
Thank you. And I'm chairing this meeting. Zena Brabazon, the chair of CPAC and cabinet member for children, schools and families. So over to on the screen, I've messed it up so many times today. Do you know why? Because I feel like I'm on school holidays. It's because I feel like we've broken up.
We are, Chair.
It's like school, isn't it? What?
Quite a few of us are.
Yeah, exactly. So can we have? No, it's true. And it's people on the screen. Well, Richard, should we start? I can't stop. Turn around. Richard, do you want to start, and then we'll.
Yeah. Good evening. It's Richard Hutton. I'm the Council's Performance Data and Analytics Manager.
Philip.
Hi.
Visible man.
Yeah, my name's Philip Slaughter. I'm the Scrutiny Support Officer for Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel.
Jackie.
Good evening, everyone. Jackie DeFalco, Director for Early Help Prevention and SEND.
And Hajira.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Hydra Sheikh, named Doctor for Children in Care in Haringey.
Right, so welcome everybody. I think we've done that bit now. So now we can go to the questions. So give me the sack. I've got, let me take it in order. I've got Felicia, Ibrahim, Anna, Mabule, and George. Okay. Okay, so Felicia.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my one was on page 4 and it's item 4.9. I'm just checking because they had 11 young people that were with their parents. So just trying to understand what that means. Is it more of they were in care and then they just been monitored whilst they're at home with the parents? Just understanding what would parents mean.
So I would take a couple of questions and then you answer. So you do it sort of in 2s and 3s. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say thank you, Richard, for providing us 4.9 because it's very helpful when compared to last year, and it gives us an idea and through certain things we might have expected. But my question was on where are we? Page 7, to do with 4.20 on the EHCPs. It would be good to know how do we document those that are in, and it's probably a question also for Jackie for obvious reasons. So it'd be good to know how many we have in the pipeline that are coming into the system but haven't been formally, agreed upon or assessed. So they're identified, they're going through the process. And I think more of a comment than a question in terms of the support that we're offering to those people who may want to consider all their options if they don't get their desired outcome. Thank you.
Okay. So Richard, can you answer those and then we'll move on to the next batch?
Okay, yeah. The first one, place with parents. This is parents or people with parenting responsibility. So it's not. So it means that we are the corporate parent for the children, but we don't. We're not providing the care because there's someone there who can do that. On the technicalities of exactly why that would happen, I'd have us in the room.
Would anybody from the social care team want to comment? Dion?
Thank you, Chair. So occasionally we might have a situation where, for example, we'd be in care proceedings. And if we're in care proceedings, a parent might be placed in a parent and child foster placement. And in that scenario, it might be that the child is then placed with parents, or it could be towards the end of proceedings. We have a child who is gone home with the parent in a community. And so it's at the conclusion of that process that we might see this kind of arrangement. Also with older young people who've been in care for a period of time and have made a decision that they want to return. And so in such circumstances, we can undertake assessment, and the assessment is called a placement with parents assessment to work out what is needed.
Want to follow on Ibrahim's point about EHCPs? I know Jackie,
Yep.
if you might want to comment
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So we do produce an annual report on education healthcare plans that we refuse to assess or refuse to issue. So we've done that for the last 2 years, and we use that to track and monitor to make sure that our decision making is robust. We had that validated in our SEND inspection, so we think the methodology that we're applying is correct. But in terms of the last 12 months, of all of the plans that we had refused to issue or refused to assess, the main reasons for those were either the children had moved out of borough, that the multi-agency panel had felt that actually there was more that could be done to support children's needs through the ordinary offer of education, that some of our children and young people had moved into employment or training, or that we didn't have enough information. And so we share all of this analysis with our head teachers so that they're very much aware of the reasons and how we compare in terms of with our statistical neighbours and our benchmarking. And then the other thing that we do is that if we do refuse to issue or to assess for any HCP, we offer something called a next steps meeting. So everyone is offered that, where we can look at why the decision's been made, but also how can they be supported through the ordinary offer of education. And we generally do that with the education provider and the person that's made the referral, which tends to be education. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that, or?
Yes, not to sort of, that's very helpful, Jackie, and that's, thank you for that. And not to sort of labour the point, but I think it would be good to get some clarity then in terms of what happens at the next step side of things, because I understand it's quite common regardless of how they're being referred, but I'm not necessarily clear in terms of how that would work in a scenario where the education professional may not pursue it, if that makes sense, because of the decision that's been taken. So it's about what independent support we offer them. I'm assuming they're going to be referred to CNDS, for example, or a third party, but who's their advocate really is what I'm trying to get at. Ultimately, who's their advocate that's saying, no, that was this is probably the most realistic, outcome for you, best outcome for you, or maybe it's not really. Just wondering how that'll work in that kind of context. I know it's very theoretical and might be appropriate for tonight, but it's just more of a, so we can come back to as a broader theme at our future meeting. Thank you.
Anne wanted to comment, or because I think you just preempted what we were thinking.
Yes, so we have two panels here, one that focuses on children in care, and that will include some who have EHCP plans. And then we have another panel for which we have Send Power and on the panel, and they receive regular reports about this sort of aspect of the work. And so I think it might be helpful if we give you some information outside of the meeting so that we can keep the topics separate, but also give you the information. Otherwise, we'll just become. Yeah. Yes, I hope that's helpful.
Anna, you were next.
Thank you, Richard, for the report. You said at the start that the drop in the number of children in care in Haringey is due to the drop in the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And on page 2 of the reporting, item 4.2, it says that the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in Haringey is 32 children below the National Transfer Scheme threshold. So I wanted to ask if there's a particular reason why we are receiving less than the national threshold.
I'm going to ask Anne to answer that. Anne or Dion to answer that question, I think. Is that all right, Anne?
Sure. So, Councillor, thank you very much for your question. Prior to COVID, and Richard, do come in if I've got this not quite right.
Yeah.
But prior to COVID, our numbers used to be quite high. Post-COVID, the entry into the country seems to have changed. So pre-COVID, we had a lot of young people who would arrive on the back of a lorry, for example. Since COVID, people come through a different route, usually by the seas, and so that has changed the numbers that come through to Haringey. The other thing that's happened is there's the National Transfer Scheme, and so pre-COVID, London was a high recipient of our young people who are unaccompanied asylum seekers. And there was an equation that said that local authorities should receive 0.7% of the number of children in care. They needed to be unaccompanied asylum seekers. That then changed to 0.1, but are distributed, the young people are distributed across the country. So many are going past London to other places. I just want to check with Richard. Richard, is there anything more that you'd like to add?
Just it's 0.1% of the child population, not the children in care population.
My apologies.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Did you want to come back, Anna? Looked like you do.
Because the equation is 0.1% of the child population and we have fewer children in the borough than other boroughs.
No, the number we should have has increased. When it was 0.7, it was it was number X. And when it was 0.1, it was a higher number. It's that we have fewer children presenting in Haringey.
Yeah.
So what we do with the National Transfer Scheme is we do hear from the ports, such as Kent in particular, that they have pressures and they invite us to support them and receive young people into our care, and we offer to do that. But it's the route into the country has changed. Just want to hand over to Richard, who I could hear coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. So the point of the threshold is this is the point where we can say we've actually got our fair share now. So we're going to refuse to take any more from Kent or Heathrow, wherever they come from. But as we're below that threshold at the moment, when Kent or someone asks, we say yes.
So we don't have the maximum number we could have. So that's why whenever we're and so that we highlight it there to say what the shortfall is. So it's should have.
I think fundamentally you're trying to be fair. The fair distribution, because it was London that was taking them originally. Mabule.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard, for a really good report. My question is on Youth Justice Services 4.22. But before I sort of ask my question, can I just ask for a clarity? The last one, 75% have up-to-date asset plus. What does that mean? Or which group are we talking about? Then I will ask my question.
Okay. Yeah, the 73% relates to the cohort within the Youth Justice Service.
That have an up-to-date
70%
assessment.
of them have their it's called an asset plan. It's their assessment. It's their equivalent of a care plan, if it were, within Youth Justice.
That 75% is also, it involves some sort of care or support from social services, children who are known to us, basically.
Some of them will be. About a third of the Youth Justice cohort is open to social care at the same time.
Okay.
So there is an overlap.
Thank you for that. My question is on basically 22% of current cohort are also children in care, and 6% children in need, and 3 is also children who currently have an active child protection plan. So it's kind of so that's like the way I'm reading. It's quite high. So maybe some sort of explanation why what are we kind of doing to prevent our looked after children maybe involving with youth justice system in first place, or what kind of preventative measures have we put in place to make sure that we're helping as many young people as we can?
I think the question is about the percentages of the percentages. So Richard or Richard?
Okay,
Oh,
I'll
Jackie.
come in.
Richard and then
Richard and Jackie.
I'll just come in first and say, with the looked after percentage looked after, 22% of the youth justice system being looked after. This is a bit of a chicken and egg situation here, because as Anne can explain, when a child is remanded in custody, they automatically become looked after. So at the moment, we've got a few children in our looked after cohort are remanded in custody. So they're there because of the offending, not the other way round, as it were. So.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I do appreciate that it would look quite high. It used to be a third, it's now a quarter of the cohort of children in care, and that has reduced in the last 2 years, and it does compare with our statistical neighbours. But Matthew Knights, who's the head of service for youth justice and young people at risk, is joining us a bit later, and will share a detailed report about the interventions we're doing with the children in care cohort.
If I might add, there used to be a time where if a young person was remanded or even entered the criminal justice system, then they weren't considered to be in care. And that the impact of that is that they didn't get the support of a social worker to make sure that they had their health and care and all their, and somebody was following and monitoring them. So now when they're remanded, they become a child in care. And so is the right word, counterintuitively, it's a good thing, because that means that we have to have regular reviews, make sure that they're getting education. If we hear that the institution becomes inadequate, then we can race down there and make sure that they've already been seen. We can check up on them. They're not lost in the system. And it means that should they come out of care out of the criminal justice system before the age of 25, we will support them through resettlement, which is really, really important, because resettlement means they get housed, they support with education, so that they don't quickly go back into the system.
Very, very quick follow-up question on a different matter. The situation with the dentist appointment with young people. So I was wondering why, obviously at some point it was very difficult to find an HS dentist. Is it something to do with that, or is it young people notoriously don't like dentists? Which one of it is? Yes. But also it's an important service that needs to be, they need to receive that, basically.
Thank you. It's a really important question. It's something that we are very clear that we want to make sure that our young people do see dentists. It tends to be older young people who make the decision that they don't want to be going to the dentist. So in terms of the figures that we have, 88%, I think, that is an improvement, and we strive always to try and have it as close to 100% as possible. But we are dealing with some older young people who make choices.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just on page 7.4.1, the table with regard NEET 19 to 21-year-olds, and you did speak to some of this, Richard, so you're probably going to hate me even more. Obviously, nearly, if I'm interpreting this right, nearly 3/4 of that table is just sort of bracketed under other. And I was wondering if we had any more detail as to what was contained in that other.
Yeah. Without wanting to paraphrase this, we have asked this question of Emma, the head of service, and the answer is that it's very hard to motivate a large percentage of 19 to 21-year-olds into activity. But that's what their personal advisors try to do.
But we don't. But I guess I'm asking. We haven't been. There's no sort of formal reasoning as to why they are neat. Just like many other 18 to 21-year-olds.
Exactly that. Yeah. They. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Ellen?
Thanks. Nobody else has asked my question, so I'll ask a different one.
No meeting would be complete.
Oh no, it wouldn't, but it's not on my usual thing. Richard will be relieved. I'm on page 5, Richard, on the table, which is under 4.11. So it was around the placement changes and reasons placement ended, and it was the 11% with standards of care concern. Now, I know we're talking about small numbers, and I wouldn't want anybody to, identify the child or the family, but just wondered if there were any trends sitting underneath that, or any sort of particular instances that you think are notable for us to be aware of, and aware, Richard, that may be for other members of the team.
I'd say, first of all, the 11% is unusually high for this. It fluctuates. And as you say, because if elsewhere it says, no, it is we keep our children very few changes. So when there is a change, it makes a disproportionate volume of it. Some of this was due to the rebranding of the semi-independent accommodation, supported accommodation, where there was a lot of changes of placements because of that. Other than that, it's,
Is that the new inspection rate, the sort of inspection and registration stuff for the semi-independent?
Yeah. Yes.
Makes sense.
Are there any more questions from across both committees before I go to Paul? Any more questions here? Paul?
So I wanted to follow up on your question about this aggregated data and this large number of kids who we don't know about, who are neither in education or employment or training, which I think probably poses two questions. I think we do need to interrogate the data and try to understand whether that's due to what's happening to them at the point in life when they're 19 to 21, or whether it's something that's related to something that happened earlier on. Because until we can understand what are those factors beyond the difficulty to motivate them, we don't really have any tools to improve really what is the only outcome measure I think that we've got of these kids, what's happened to them during, having been care experience. So I take the liberty of asking a not health question, which was, it would be great if it was possible to do some more inquiry of the data, not necessarily quantitative, but it may be just talking to them and finding out and working out whether this is, one could hypothesize.
Yeah. Can I just to put it into context, the 55% is exactly the same as the England average. So it's not an unusual situation Haringey finds itself in here.
And to add on to that, it's an area of work that is our area, one of our key areas of focus for coming months, and hence we have both the Care Leavers programme, which is particularly designed in part to look at how we can make sure that we are having as many pathways for young people to have routes into education, employment and training and jobs in the family business. And I also think we'll be talking about this a bit further on into the meeting when we look at the London picture, and we have Matthew Raleigh who's here and is going to present in relation to that. But we certainly are working quite hard in this area to address this, because we want to make sure that people have the best possible outcomes.
Thanks, Dion. Can I just add to that before we leave this report? I think this issue about the NEETs and the whole issue about young people on employment training or who are not in education because of illness or disability is a very topical issue and something that, again, we might want to focus on a bit more as we get into the new municipal year, because there are such big changes being proposed nationally, the money that's going to be invested in helping get people into employment. We're just starting, Jackie and I were at a meeting recently with the college to build up a better partnership with College of North East London. And this is a huge focus. This group of young people who I think are on the radar nationally, obviously, in not having support. We heard Winston talk about it in the Aspire meeting about not having, you know, the levers and the networks, and all of that is so true. So I hope we're going to really build on that and come back maybe with a briefing or whatever on progress. I'm sure everybody here would be really interested to contribute what they know and ideas to move forward on that. It really is a big issue. I think 22 young people, illness and disability is quite high, I thought, for example. I think we really have to think about that. So if that's okay with everyone, I'm going to leave this report, going to move on. Is that okay? Thank you, Richard, for,
welcome.
as always, a comprehensive report. As I said, it's all about very individual things, and then we talk about numbers. But now we're going to move into a bit more depth, and I think, Sandy, you're presenting this report, is that right? And I've called this a sort of introductory seminar into, and under the guise of a report. It's a report about what care is about and what being in care means. And I think for people who don't know a lot about it, it's a very helpful guide. So Sandy, over to you. Thank you, all authors, for putting it together.
Actually, Keith that put the report together before his departure last week.
Well, thanking him from
so
afar.
Thank you, Keith, for doing that. I'm going to I joined the meeting his presentation. So, I mean, just going through it, I know there's some areas within the report that might overlap slightly with what Richard has spoken about, so I won't spend too much time going over them. But what does care mean for our children and young people? So, national research highlights that children and young people who are received into the care of local authorities have often suffered significant trauma and neglect. Emotional impact of separating a child or a young person from his or her family is often minimised, leaving our children to experience feelings of rejection, separation and loss. These feelings are further compounded when our young people experience multiple placement moves. For some young people, being in care can be perceived as stigmatising, as you're often judged for not having your parents in your life. Young people have reported that some professionals may also be as ambitious or aspirational in terms of your skills and abilities and set lower academic levels in terms of educational attainment. Young people have also commented that your voice in relation to the decisions making and future life choices is often not heard. So what does care mean for our children and young people? Oh, sorry, I'm still on the same one, sorry. So what does care mean for Haringey's children? From a child's initial entry into care, we work seamlessly with our partner agencies to ensure the best outcomes for our children and our young people. We are committed as a council to being the best corporate parents and take our corporate parenting responsibilities very seriously, We're committed to listening to our care experienced young people and are actively taking steps to improve services. We also remain ambitious and aspirational for all of our young people and value their successes. We're committed to ensuring children in our care receive support early on to help address any adversity or trauma that they might have suffered and to give them foundations for a happy, healthy and successful life. So reasons for children and young people being accommodated in the last 12 months. As I mentioned, I think Richard has touched upon this, but the highest category in which children were accommodated within the last 6 months was a result of abuse and neglect. 55 children were accommodated because of abuse and neglect concerns. And this figure shows an incremental rise in comparison with 2023 to 24 data, where it was families in acute distress. Families in acute distress has fallen compared to the last year's data. 12 children and young people were accommodated in the last 6 months compared to 16 children in 2023-24. Family dysfunction, absent parenting, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and socially unacceptable behaviours are other stated reasons as to why children have become looked after. So this is just a visual graphic on the children that have reasons for children coming into care over the last 12 months, which I've just spoken about, and the pathways for care, which the report does go into more detail on these. However, the pathways into care are either a voluntary agreement, which is section 20, accommodation for our children, or an interim care order, which is section 38, and a full care order, section 37. And that's where the local authority share parental responsibility with the parents. We may also have children coming to the care system due to police protection and emergency protection orders, or as we spoke about during Richard's presentation, children and young people being remanded into the local authority care. So the profile of children being received into Haringey Council's care, I'll go on to show the table which highlights the demography of children and young people being received into local authority care. It appears that we have an increase in the age range from 12 to 17-year-olds of 182 children out of the 316 children currently accommodated, which is 58%. There's a slight error there in the I think in the next slide, where it shows 53%, which is noted in the graph, which I will go on to. In terms of gender, we have 57% of males more likely to be received into care, and of Black British or global majority heritage. So again, that's just the graphic on the number of children in terms of their aging and ethnicity that have come into care over the last 12 months. So moving on to placement types. Prior to placing any child in care, attempts are always made where possible. Wherever possible, it's safe to do for children to remain within the family. In the event that this is not possible, a child may be placed into care in a foster placement, for example. When children and young people are placed in care, placements are identified in line with the child or the young person's needs. These placements are either kinship, family placements, we have connected carers, foster carers, could be residential placements, children's homes, supported accommodation, or in some instances, even secure settings. So again, I'm just showing the graphics on the number of children looked after by placement type. And we can see that 72% of our children are in foster placements. 47% of our looked after children are actually in our own provisions, own Haringey provisions. So placement stability increases a child's opportunity to develop secure attachments with his or her carers, ensures a child or young person has safe and consistent care, minimising frequent moves and disruptions, which is crucial for a child's emotional health and the child's development. Schofield et al. 2005 states that placement instability can have detrimental effects on the overall well-being and development of children, leading to poor outcomes. Monroe in 2006 reported that frequent placement moves contributed significantly to placement breakdowns and feelings of rejection. Placement indicators. Haringey Council continues to monitor placement stability in terms of both short-term stability and the long-term stability. Again, I think Richard did briefly speak on, placement moves within the last 12 months. Short-term placement stability is measured by a child having had 3 or more placement moves over the last 12 months. So I will move on to briefly after this slide onto a table which illustrates, and you've probably got it in the report, illustrating the number of placement moves children in care have experienced during the last 12 months. The table highlights that out of 316 children who are currently accommodated, 289 have had less than 2 or less placement moves, which equates to 91.5% of our children in care, which have had less than 2 placement moves. And table 3 will indicate that 27 children have had 3 or more placement moves, 8.5%, which is comparable with our statistical neighbours. So again, there's the visual graphic on that. So again, there's the graphic which shows our statistical neighbours, and this is a comparison of the long-term placement stability, statistical neighbours, and overall nationally as well, what the numbers are. So we are just a little bit above as of this year. So moving on to our care leavers. A care leaver is defined as a young person who was looked after by the local authority for at least 13 weeks since the age of 14, and who was looked after by the local authority at school leaving age or thereafter, and who is under the age of 25 years old. The Young Adult Service currently support 80 young people aged 16 to 18 and 407 young people aged 18 to 25. We also have an additional 152 young people that live independently and are settled, but we continue to maintain yearly contact via the Young Adult Service duty team until they reach the age of 25. And obviously the team intervene as and when there's any additional needs that arise for any of our care leavers. Education, employment and training. We're both ambitious and aspiration for all of our care leavers, and lead a monthly aspirations panel, working in partnership with our virtual school, Haringey Works, Drive Forward, North London Partnership Consortium and the Tottenham Foundation to provide an ever-increasing opportunities for our care leavers in Haringey and those that reside outside. We also seek to identify mentorship programs from organisations such as Sister Systems, Haringey Mind and Hope for the Young that can offer additional guidance, support and encouragement to help develop the confidence to overcome challenges and boost self-esteem. We're supporting 38 care leavers that are currently at university. We have successfully supported 29 into civil service internships between 2018 and 2025. And we have a task and finish apprenticeship group dedicated to increasing jobs in the family business. We currently have 4 in council employment and developing further 6 apprenticeship opportunities across the council. Independent living. During our young person's care journey from 16 to 18, it's the role of the foster carers and key workers to ensure that the young person is given the opportunity to develop their independent skills within the home environment by way of cooking, cleaning, managing their own personal finances, self-care. And this is monitored using the life skills modules. All young people are expected to complete the Money House, which again was spoken about earlier on, which is a course in how to manage their money, to budget before they are nominated for their permanent tenancy. This is to ensure that all necessary preparation is provided to support our young people to sustain their own tenancies and reduce the risk of rent arrears and evictions. The course actually covers managing tenancy agreements, avoiding eviction, online safety and scams, budgeting, looking at spending habits, benefits, banking, planning, planning for the future, and energy efficiency. Mental health. Children in care and care leavers are among the most vulnerable groups in society, with significantly higher rates of mental health difficulties compared to their peers. Despite having high levels of need for this cohort of young people, young people experience significant barriers in accessing timely and effective mental health support. So what are our strengths and difficulties questionnaires telling us? When a child is received into care, a strengths and difficulties questionnaire is completed by the main carer, i.e. the foster carer, either the friends and family carer, kinship carer, or if they're in a different type of placement, whoever's responsible for them there will support the child to complete that. The questionnaires help assess the emotional and behavioural health of the child and identify any potential areas of concern. According to the national figures, in 2024, 75% of 43,390 care experienced children who met the criteria had a SDQ score returned. 40% of care experienced children who received an SD score, which was identified as a cause of concern, a further 13% of the scores were considered on the borderline of cause of concern. In terms of Haringey's children's services, of the 84% of children in care who have had an SDQ, 40% are deemed to be as cause for concern and requiring additional support. Mental health support for care experienced children and young people. So we have the child and adolescent mental health services provided through CAMS. We'll continue to work with our CAMS partners in addressing the mental health needs of our care experienced children and young people. Haringey Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services provides multidisciplinary assessments and treatment for children between the ages of 0 to 17 with mental ill health or severe emotional and behavioural difficulties. CAMS provides Tier 2 targeted services for children with complex needs, experience mild and moderate emotional and mental health difficulties, and Tier 3 specialist services address more complex and severe mental health needs, such as severe emotional difficulties and functional impairment. We also have First Steps, and this service also continues to work with our children who continue to experience First Steps Plus, continue to experience 3 or more placement moves during the course of the year. They will continue to receive a service from First Steps Plus to support them. This provision is designed to support children between the ages of 5 to 16 to minimise and prevent further placement instability by using targeted and assertive outreach support. Which brings me to the end of the presentation, and it recaps what's in the report. So,
little baptism there.
yeah.
So, who would questions, comments? So I've got George, Anna, Felicia. Well, let's start there. Okay.
For that very detailed report on day one. Just in the actual body of the report, I've got a couple of questions, which you may not know the answer to, given very well. But on page 19, point 8.15, sorry, where we're talking about housing options for young people. Just on the last point about reciprocal housing, I was just wondering whether or not, if in those circumstances, PRS accommodation is identified for that young person, do they retain all of their rights as a care leaver? We don't discharge a duty in that sense. And also, if it is out of borough, does the duty remain with Haringey, or
Yeah.
it remains Haringey?
The duty remains with Haringey, and no matter where the young person is, they could be, the other side of the country, but the duty will always remain with us. So they will have an allocated personal advisor from the young adult service that will support them up to the age of 25, regardless of where they're housed or where they choose to live.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, sorry, I've got a bonus question.
Go on.
Just, it's on the same page, 8.19, with regard to young people coming out of custody. There was I just wonder whether or not we have formal, I know we're talking about small numbers, but whether or not we have formal arrangements in place with other local authorities where it is unsafe for one reason or another for that young person to come back to Haringey, and what that looks like. Because in the next agenda item, we've got another report
We do.
that suggests that there aren't many formal arrangements of that nature. And I know from previous experience that it can work sometimes, but yeah, just whether you can speak to that point.
So probably can't comment on the formal arrangements, but in terms of, assessing a risk to a person that's coming out of custody, there will always be that joint up work with the Youth Justice Service to look at what the risks are, any intelligence that's been collected by our sort of police colleagues and youth justice colleagues to make sure that we're assessing and looking at the right places and where it's safe for a child to be. So yeah.
To come in here or say that maybe more detail for the report on youth justice. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay. So Anna, you're next, I think.
My question has been partly answered because it's similar to George's. So it's on item 8.19 in the report. So on young people released from prison, that paragraph concludes by saying that there can be location and postcode challenges for this group of care leavers, which can make settling to permanence more complex. Could you explain what kind of location and postcode challenges you're referring to here?
So again, that would be on, like what I mentioned before, in relation to what, the specifics for that young person, what they've been involved in. It's not a generic sort of postcode challenges. It's specifically to do with who they've associated with and who they've been known to, if there's been any gang affiliation, for example. So that would all be considered in terms of us, looking for the most suitable place for any of our children that are coming out of remand to be placed.
Alicia.
Chair, and thank you for the report. I've got two questions on two different points. The first one is just out of interest on page 18, and that's 8.7, where it talks about supporting university. Is that me?
Don't know.
Okay. Supporting people in university. It's just checking out of curiosity. Is it just bachelor's level, or is it more like master's? Because it goes up to the age of 25 that you support the young people. So is it just checking that one? So that's the first one.
So it's usually at the degree level that we end up supporting young people. However, it would be, if their choice was to go on to further education, and obviously we would have them aspirations for our young people and push them to do that. If that's what they wanted, then they would continue to be supported through any level of education up to the age of 25.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good just out of interest if there was anything like that, that we know that, oh, you've got 10 that have gone and done masters, because that would be amazing that, they felt supported to go and do that kind of level of education. And then the other question I had was on page 15. And it's just the table 2 under 6.0, just looking at the demographics of the children in care. And as you can see, there's the highest percentage is people of Black or Black British you got 42% that are actually in care. And then also, just want to see, I know it's difficult because you can't determine what's going to happen to somebody, but it's what kind of support are they getting? And then also just where you have the category that's mixed, what's the breakdown of mixed if you have that as well?
So I don't know if I can answer that question for you. Repeat again, what's the category of mix, did you say?
Yeah, so because is it like somebody mixed like black, white, mixed
It could
Asian?
be, yeah. It, you know,
Yeah,
it could
what's
be,
mixed?
yeah, it could be reference to any child. I mean, ideally, when we're working within the council, when we have, you know, certain panels and meetings where we're discussing children, we will go into the specific detail of around their ethnicity and their culture. You know, we might have parents that are dual heritage themselves, and so we will discuss all of that as part of the child. But I suppose in terms of recording and the way the data falls off, it will show them children as mixed.
Really high percentage. I know it's something that tends to happen, unfortunately, but a really high percentage of those are Black or Black British. Again, what kind of support are we providing so that we can, like I said, you can't stop these things from happening, but just trying to get that demographics to be lower.
So it's long since been established that there is a disproportionality in terms of who is represented in the care system. And we know that you tend to see more young people who are of the global majority, Black and more males than females. And that's certainly the picture that we are seeing here. In terms of what we can do, it's really important from every stage of us becoming involved with young people that we are thinking about their identity, their culture. And so, as Sandy has said, in terms of all of the panels that we have and wherever we're talking about young people, we're very much holding that at the forefront. We want only to have young people in the care system who need to be in the care system. And some of that is in part, so things that we'll be doing even more so going forward. It's the work that you can do with the communities sometimes, so that there is an ability to try and avoid children coming into care if you can tap into networks. So that's an example of the kind of work that we could do that could divert young people from coming into care. But it's something that we're exercised about, that we absolutely have to keep challenging to make sure we're doing the very best that we can in this.
I'll challenge people today.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question, and it made me immediately think of disproportionality in so many other systems and segments of society. One of the things that we have worked to do is to be sure that we have reduced exclusions. It's just one factor. And if children remain in school, then they're likely to get care and support that they need, which might be one of the small contributing factors to not to diverting the pathway from care. We know that there is disproportional, I think so, there's disproportionality in unemployment, in poor housing, in poor health, and. But what do we try to do? We try to have an early intervention approach for all the community and every individual child where we can to make the difference. There is another interesting report. I don't know if Matt Knight is on the system, and it's one that I try and have on my screen or close to me, and it's about the 20 most prolific offenders. You might remember that piece of work. Matt Knight has redone it recently. And if you look at the 20 most prolific offenders in Haringey, early trauma, all what we call the ACEs, family breakdown, mental health, parents imprisoned, and these are the things we're trying to redress. So, you know, if we could support young children, I mean, they're excluded or suspended at aged 8, it's kind of like a script. If we can push back all those things, then it would impact here. We're trying to work to get small things, seemingly small things, such as speech and language into the community earlier. If we can get speech and language into the community, then that means that children who might become frustrated with their behaviour are not frustrated with their behaviour. It might mean that we then need to keep them in school so they can read and communicate. Anyway, I'm on my soapbox. I'm going to come off of it, but you get the general picture, you know, societal change. But things like speech and language, it's a small thing, but it's a big thing.
I think you're next, Matt Boulay. Have I got any more hands going up? Anna. So Matt Boulay and then Anna.
I suppose mine is more of a comment on the education and employment and training and paragraph. What does that mean? Yeah, just wanted to say that basically, obviously, these children are looked after children. They are already starting life in a disadvantaged way. So it's really heartening to see that so many of them are making to university and going into apprenticeship as into civil service and other areas where they will get valuable skills to be able to work. And so just wanted to say that that's really, I mean, education is the key to anyone coming from a disadvantaged background. Education is always in there, one and single ticket to come out of that situation. So I'm really pleased with that paragraph. Thank you.
Anna. That was really a comment.
Yes.
There wasn't a question mark at the end. Okay, just making sure. Do you want, Anna?
Two questions. Well, the first is on I'm on page 20 of the line 3. It says in the first project 84% of children have their FD2. Is the reason that that's only 84% simply a timing thing that they're not in for 6 months, or are there children that have been in care for a while that for some reason haven't had that?
So this is, I mean, as going back to our conversation around the dentals earlier on and children not wanting to do them, we don't, you know, we do have some children that don't want to participate in undertaking the SDQs. Otherwise, wherever possible, they are supported to complete the questionnaires.
Thank you. And maybe in the future, it would be quite good to have a breakdown of that, just in case there's some that we're just not getting around to, or just knowing how much of that was choice versus our service, I suppose. Thank you. And then my other question or clarifications in the same page on 9.1 mental health paragraph, which sort of seems to address the fact that it is a problem, but doesn't say much else. And I wondered if there's any comment about how we're supporting these young people who obviously have a kind of overlap with higher rates of mental health issues, but also have these bigger barriers. And we know that mental health services are hard to access for everyone, you know, including people who find services easier to access. So I just wondered what we're doing, how we're kind of giving that extra support as a service to people who have those extra barriers. Thank you.
So I think in the presentation, I did mention some of the services that we do often link into, and we will have them involved right from the onset, from when a child comes into care. I think, you know, sometimes there may be you know, services where we're waiting for children to become more settled, and then the services can be put in place. But we'll always have some point of contact through our first steps and CAMS where we can go to even for carers to seek support on a one-to-one basis, because they're the ones that are providing the care on a daily basis to the children. But I know there's work that we're doing currently. We're looking at our offer of mental health support to our young people in care to see what we can do to improve that, to make sure it's more timely for them.
Right, and one more go round. Any more questions? Sorry, sorry, Dion, I didn't see you.
Yeah, so following on from what Sandy has said, we have undertaken a review of the services that we offer, and we know that there have been other local authorities who are doing some really good and innovative approaches in terms of delivery. And so, I have to say, linked in with Dr. Sender, we've been able to make contact with some of those local authorities and gone out to explore what the art of what's possible, because this is such an important area for our young people, and the area, another area on which we want significant focus in coming months. So the intention is that we are going to be building and delivering services quite differently, bringing it closer to the teams so that we can mobilise the support that young people need in a way that is much more individualised for them, but also speedier in response than we've been able to do previously. The aspiration of the work that we're doing in coming months.
Before we leave this report, it is like a tour of how the system sort of works and some of the issues. I just want to make an observation, which I think sort of links in what you just said, Dion, which is what we're seeing is a sort of change in the service. We've got this huge number and growing number of care leavers, and we've got a smaller cohort, happily, not coming into care. So there are implications for the services we provide, it seems to me, but also implications as they move on, young people leaving care, all the issues you said about their health, their mental health, their well-being, their housing. So in a sense, there's a pressure on the service to rethink all the time about how it operates because of the shape of the demography, if you like, of the cohort. I don't know if that resonates. I suspect it might, and I think that raises questions about service design, doesn't it? I mean, it's not really seeking an answer. I'm just sort of making another comment, without a question mark. Yeah.
It's a long throughput. Yeah. But yes.
Big implications for services. Yeah. That's what seems to me. That's why we'll keep returning to these issues. Yeah. But thank you, Sandy. Thank you for a very good presentation and an excellent report.
On your first day.
So you have to raise the standard next time. Well, I'm going to take us to agenda item 7, which is a presentation around care leaving. So now we've talked about how the system works, but there are big issues. This is a huge national issue. It's talked about all the time, I think, in social care circles. Not that I'm always in those circles, but it is talked about a lot if the national press is anything to go by. So, Dion, are you leading on this?
So I'm really pleased to be introducing Matt Raleigh, who's here from the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance, who is a programme lead in relation to care leavers and has undertaken or has led on a piece of work with the care leavers survey. And so is going to present the findings from that survey, but also to talk us through some of the work happening across the region. So I think it's really important. You've heard a lot about the Haringey context this evening, and this sets the London context. So it gives you an opportunity to see what's happening more broadly across the region. Matt, over to you, and thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can I just check if you can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Well, welcome to the meeting, Matt.
Oh, great. It's a pleasure to be here. You may not remember, but you invited me to your corporate parenting board probably a couple of years ago, when this work was just beginning to get underway. So it's yeah, real pleasure to be invited back. So what I'll look to do is to run through a couple of presentations, but not in full, because I don't want to talk too much at you. The survey that Dion mentioned is really quite detailed, and I am able to kind of circulate it in full afterwards. So for those who'd like to kind of see every nuance, including sort of how the Haringey position fits in with that, you'll be able to. But for the purposes of today, I think I'll sort of give a highlight report, and then make sure that you have some time for discussion and to ask any questions that may arise. So if I just start by introducing myself, my name is Matt Raleigh. I work for an organisation called LIA, which stands for the London Innovation and Improvement Alliance. That is a bit of a mouthful, but what it is in real money is the collective work programme for London's children's services. So obviously there's 3 local authorities in London, each of which runs their own children's services, but there's areas of commonality where it makes sense for them to work together, and we are the sort of vehicle that they use to do that. There's a number of there's 5 priority work streams we work on across London, and one of those is around supporting London's care leavers. So I'll talk to you just a little bit about that work stream today, and a little bit about the surveying work that we've done to go alongside that, and then how those two fit together. So I will just look to share first my presentations tonight with you. Okay, perhaps could someone let me know if you're able to see this and if it's legible?
It's fine, thank you.
Yep, great. So I think as you introduced the item, you kind of talked about the pressing needs. This is what Josh McAllister had to say about it in the independent review of social care in 2022. And at exactly the same time, London's directors of children's services were saying we need to do something regionally to support our care leavers, and so had tasked Leah and a variety of others with doing that. There's a little bit of a backstory here as to how we sort of funded that to get off the ground. The only thing I'd really stress, I think, is the second bullet points, which is that the original intention was to deliver something that we call the Pan-London Care Leavers Compact. That is essentially a regional offer to London's care leavers, and the intent behind it, and that's an intent that is a response to what care leavers consistently tell us, is that they wanted more consistency in the support offers that were available to them. There's elements of consistency across what's offered in London, but there's also quite significant areas of inconsistency across local authority offers. And whilst we were doing that, they wanted the breadth and quality of those support offers to be increased as well. This is the kind of slide that sort of summarises the work programme as a whole. And there's a couple of different aspects to it. The first I'd emphasise is it's very much a partnership activity. Although in the main I'm here talking to you tonight about the local authority role, which is absolutely critical, we were really sort of clear from the outset that to make a difference in this space, that responsibility is broader. Try and avoid the term corporate parenting, and this work we use the term community parenting. to kind of reflect the fact that we believe our statutory partners, the voluntary and community services, and society at large has a really key role to play here. And you'll see some of those partners that we work with really closely on the bottom left of the screen. One of the things we looked to do quite early on was to build some really tangible, consistent offers across London's children, sort of that all London care leavers would be able to access. I'll just flick on one slide so you can see some of the stuff that we did. So we've worked with the 5 ICS areas, so integrated health care systems, our health partners in London, to agree schemes to exempt all London care leavers from prescription charges. There is an agreement with TfL, which hasn't been without its hitches, but has secured half-price travel on buses and trams for what's not 16,000 actually. Our current estimate is about 19,000 18 to 25-year-old care leavers in London. The largest local authority elements in those initial set of offers were around housing, and in particular we've spread the exemption for council tax, which now exists in 32 of 33 London local authorities, and have secured a number of other kind of common agreements around whether or not care leavers are assessed as being intentionally homeless if something goes wrong with their tenancies, around ensuring that local authorities place them in priority need brackets. And actually, I think probably more importantly than anything else is that final point of joint housing and children's services protocols. We do tend to see that where housing and children's departments work really well and with a shared purpose together around their care leavers, then care leaver experiences around housing tend to be a lot better. So making sure that those kind of formal agreements are in place, and then hopefully local authorities are kind of meeting the spirit of those is really important. If I just flip back one slide, I will say that our work now has moved beyond just the brokering of those kind of tangible in your pocket offers. And we have these 4 themes groups that you can see on the right hand side around housing, health, education, training, employment and relationships. I would actually, in the last year, we've pretty much added a 5th group, which is about care leavers in the criminal justice system. And each of those has its own work programme emerging around some of the sort of really difficult stuff that is confronting care leavers. You probably won't need me to talk to you about the shortage of London's housing stock, for example. So we have stakeholder groups that are looking to overcome some of those issues on a regional rather than sort of local borough scale, and in turn that linked with our wish to do a detailed survey of local authority views last summer, which I'll come on to talk about in a sec, because we really needed to understand, well, what is happening around housing and health and education and training and employment in local authorities. What do you do? What are your views on what the barriers are, what the successes are, and probably most importantly for our regional work programme, what is it that we should be doing with our sort of finite resources and time and abilities? Where is it that we should be focusing? So that was the kind of real motivation behind the survey that we ran last summer. So I'll stop there. I might just see if there's any questions that anyone would like to ask at that point. Otherwise, I could sort of go into some of what the survey told us.
Right, we're open for questions. Thank you very much, Matt. Have I got anybody like to lead? Ibrahim.
Thank you, Matt. It's really insightful presentation. Quite ambitious as well. There's all the lead joint life thinking side of things will be. I had one bugbear, which probably does come up quite a lot in other parts of London, I'm assuming, which is housing associations. Probably something that you might want to add on, tack on to that. So someone's gone for nomination rights and they're with a housing provider, it's not a local authority, and that particular organisation may not be attuned to care leavers' experiences or needs. It can be very, very messy very quickly. So I would be interested to see what you're doing to speak to their sort of group of the big six, the big 20 you have in Manila, as a counterweight to sort of the bar of stock housing supply. Thank you.
I just struggled to hear a little bit about that, but I kind of caught that it was a concern about the role of housing associations. Whilst I wouldn't sort of claim that we have any sort of brilliant solution to that at this moment in time, you'll see a little bit about that in the survey coming up. And what I would say is that that housing stakeholder group has a couple of really key activities that it's up to at the moment, and one of those is to get a better join up across the work of local authorities and housing associations, including leveraging better offers from housing associations. So we are keen to work with them on a London-wide scale. We currently have Clarion and MVTH attends that housing stakeholder group. We are going to launch a pilot across Clarion and Bromley local authority to look at what an absolutely best practice co-designed approach between a local authority and a housing association might look like. And we will look to kind of take that learning back into our conversations with London's housing associations, and also share how that pilot goes with other local authorities.
If it's all right, if I take in order, do you mind, George, if I go Paul and then Jim? Right, Paul and then George.
Thank you very much. You made reference to budgets, and I was just wondering how much is spent on care leaver per care leaver in different local authorities. Is there much variation? I mean, you've outlined a little bit about what's in the compact.
Honestly, I don't have a good answer to that question. I suspect it will kind of vary enormously, but Anne and Dion would probably be better positioned than me to talk about sort of care leaver budgets overall. Sorry, am I ducking? Am I ducking that? I mean, I suspect it will vary enormously per care leaver. Some will sort of make really positive transitions into adulthood and need relatively little support from the local authority. Others may need complex placements and kind of ongoing support that's quite costly. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer than that.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. It's a very interesting question, and I think it varies for the reasons that Matt has set out. There will be benchmarking data somewhere, but it might be a challenge to find it. What we might be able to do more easily is look at, say, the setup within each council, so that there's an arrangement of personal advisors and social workers and caseloads, so on. But to hand, it's really difficult to find a regular unit cost for the provision of services. It's entirely possible that one local authority has, it's kind of apples and pears. If we in Haringey have all the factors that we do, and then there's another local authority that doesn't, or that they are wealthier than us and have been more stable and have had mental health support for a long time. So it's kind of, you get to apples and pears at some point. I know that's not very helpful.
George?
Thank you very much. Just on, it's just a sort of question to go right back to the beginning. On the backstory slide, Lambeth have been cited. Just wondering why Lambeth specifically, and sort of linked, well, linked question. So just a bit of a question about Leah itself in terms of, so it's set up in 2021 under DFE funding. Is that what I'm taking from that slide? I'm just wondering how it's funded currently. So I guess what I'm trying to understand a bit more is how is the work of Leah informed by its member authorities, or does Leah in and of itself have a kind of good practice steer that it's trying to bring local authorities on board with? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'll divide the two between the care leaving work and what Leah is. So Leah is one of 9 regional innovation and improvement alliances that were set up by the DFE. I can't remember when. It wasn't that 2021 date. That's the care leaver work being started, but relatively recently, and they were set up with the principle of being something called sector-led improvement. So the idea that groups of children's services could work together around improvement and innovation, and drive that themselves rather than just, for example, responding to inspectorates. So that's where they started from, and from sort of pretty humble origins. So it had some DFE money, and I think it started off as 2 people in London, mostly sort of running things like peer challenge activities across local authority boundaries. But has developed over time as really London's directors of children's services have seen the potential around working together. So it's really London directors of children's services who drive the Leah work programme at the moment and say what it should be, and it tends to be on the things that most preoccupy you. So it's the children's workforce, making sure that you have enough high quality social workers at a reasonable rate, placements. So there's a lot of work around sort of children's homes. Some people would sort of call it the broken market around children's homes, and trying to ensure really high quality accommodation at a reasonable cost. There's work around SEND, and as I say, care leaving, which is the 2021 figure you picked out, is a more recent priority work stream that's been added with a bit of additional money from the DFE to support it. But quite a lot of Leah's income is self-generated. We get a little bit from London local authorities, a little bit from the DFE, but you may have some awareness of something called the Your Choice programme, for example, which is a very big London-wide programme around serious youth violence, run by Leah in conjunction with the local authorities, and that pulls down money from the Youth Endowment Fund and from other sort of funding bodies like that. So as we've grown, our sort of income stream has come from all sorts of different places, but our work is really directed by London's directors of children's services.
Any more questions? If everybody's maybe thinking, I'll just put a question of my own in. If I could go back to the issue of housing, Matt, this comes up at every meeting about issues for young people leaving care and their accommodation. And I'm just curious, you say in one of the slides, which is to do with the survey, how can we use our commissioning powers and relationships with housing associations to leverage better provision and support for care leavers? What strikes me about this is, with care leaving, issues of care leaving being so prominent in the national debate and some improvements coming in the bill is whether there's any triangulation with the DFE and the Ministry of Housing about these issues, because the government, there's public money funds a lot of the provision, whether it's done through local authorities, the GLA, or through Homes England and so on. So there's a lot of money that comes from the public sector involved in all of this. And I just wonder whether you've had any discussions about that, or, you know, using the leverage through directors and so on to get some improvements. I do think Ibrahim nicked my first question, which was also about registered social landlords, because we often talk about them, don't we? And so I'd be interested in your reply about how all of this is manoeuvring around national government, if you like. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do my best and probably expose myself quite quickly as not having a housing background, but there is quite a lot happening quite quickly around that. You mentioned the children's wellbeing bill, which we now believe will extend the corporate parenting responsibility to other government departments and to relevant public bodies. That was something that we pushed for really strongly via the compact and kind of in all our regional to national representations, for exactly that reason. And within the bill, you'll also see reference to the introduction of staying close as a kind of key driver for local authorities, including local authority housing departments. This would extend the duties on local authority to prioritise care leaver housing within their overall housing strategies. And try to ensure that a care leaver is kind of supported and given that wraparound support in the area in which they've kind of grown up and where they have their local links and connections. Some other changes that are sort of hot afoot and working their way through at the moment are, I think I mentioned intentional homelessness. There's now legislation in place that says that we spent about 2.5 years getting London ahead of the national curve regarding that, but that will now be legislated and removed from care leavers so that they can't be found intentionally homeless. There will be other, I think you touched on reciprocity earlier on, and we also think that there will be changes around the local connection test for care leavers. So one of the bits of data in the survey that we've done is that quite a large number of care leavers live outside of their home local authority, and it's often much harder to provide them with the support that they need to kind of build their lives in the place where they have now been living. But the combination of staying close and the removal of the local connection test, should that happen, should hugely enhance that. It means that if someone's been living in a certain area since they've been 16 or 17 years old, they will then, have the rights to apply to that local authority to be on their housing books. I think because there's a lot happening, I can't sort of give you much more clarity than that. I will say that we've got MC, HLG, and the DFE within our housing group. So we also look to work across those government departments. But yeah, I will also say that housing group still has some enormous challenges in terms of just securing enough high quality housing stock for care leavers across London. And there are some bits we're doing, but there are also some challenges there.
I
actually, that was really helpful. Thank you very much. Reminding everybody about the new legislation. We have more role, a greater role, that will be greatly welcomed. George, you were going to come back, and then I think we'll move on.
Well, thank you, Matthew. And so, you just touched on it because it was me that raised that point about reciprocal arrangements or agreements. And actually the bullet point here, and I even made a note when I read this afternoon. It's about when needed for safety, the reciprocal arrangements. I was just wondering if you were aware. Is that me? No, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering if you're aware of any good practice in regard to that kind of reciprocal arrangement, especially as it in relation to issues of safety and young people coming out of custody. And then on the next page was just a very exciting line that says there's some innovative repurposing of properties to provide small-scale semi-independent care leavers. I was wondering whether you could talk a bit more to where that's happening, what that looks like. Thank you.
Yes, sure. So it's kind of a sort of dispiriting answer than a more optimistic one. So I'm not aware of much sort of very positive work or news around reciprocal agreements. Most of the local authority feedback that we received through the survey was that they're extremely time consuming and difficult to negotiate and have to be done sort of case by case across local authorities, starting from scratch each time. So that is firmly on our list to try and do something to change that. But yeah, it's certainly in terms of my awareness, I'm not aware of anywhere that's sort of does that really, really well. In contrast, we do see local authorities kind of doing some really innovative work to try and improve their care leaver housing. And this is probably more about the housing stages just before final tenancy. So through higher end supports, through to kind of those very low support sort of final placements before a care leaver's then sort of able to go out and fly solo in their own tenancy. The local authorities we're aware of who are doing really good stuff are Kensington and Chelsea, but the one I'd really point to is Lambeth, who pretty much tore up their approach to commissioning housing for their 16 to 25-year-olds 7 years ago on the back of some very difficult experiences. And who've done a remarkable bit of commissioning work, taking it away from those big, let's buy 50 places in one go with this organisation type approach, through some very small scale bespoke offers designed to meet not just the needs of care leavers, but particular subgroups of care leavers, really tailored to their kind of individual needs. We're going to we have an exercise going on at the moment called Practice Spotlight, that's looking across a number of areas to identify some of that absolute best London practice. And we think that's some of it. So Lambeth will bring a presentation on that work to the London Children's Summit in May this year. But we also kind of have some captures of that work, so we'll be able to share it. Not everything lifts and shifts seamlessly in London. Some stuff does. Sometimes it takes a lot of work. I've sort of seen the work that's gone into Haringey's Stop and Search project, for example, to scale that up across London. But yeah, we think that there is some sort of quite innovative commissioning work that's going on around that small scale, really bespoke accommodation.
Okay. I just wanted to say generally, I think there's so much in these slides. We've only really touched the surface.
Yeah.
And we don't have the time to go through all of these things. But actually, there's a massive amount of stuff going on. And I would be quite interested to return to some of this. And I've been to the annual summit, but I did wonder whether you ever bring, I mean, it's quite hard for lead members to come together, and whether through the Innovation Alliance or the London directors, it would be possible to have a wider debate with the young people who've been involved in the survey, some of the big policy issues here. So we build up more momentum, if you like. I'll just put that out there. They're always, up for that, Anne. Yeah, I think there's such a lot in here that for us to think about. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to move us to the final written report, which is about youth justice. Now, Matthew, have you joined us?
Thank you, Matt Riley.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, and now turn to the other Matt.
Yeah, I'm here.
Matthew Knights is the head of youth justice. Have you been on the screen for most of the meeting? Because we've done introductions like twice. So do we need to do them again?
No, I've been on since.
I'll only miss somebody out and make a mess of it. So,
oh, sorry, apologies. No, I was only on it from the last agenda item.
So Matthew, you're going to take us through the youth justice slides.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So I'm assuming everybody's got the slides and has got the paper as well. So let me just bring the slides up. And just let me know once you can see.
It's up.
Yeah, thank you. That's me /us. Okay, so thank you for having me today. Councillor Bamazan's already introduced me already, but I kind of lead on youth justice and also lead on the young people at risk strategy. So essentially, following the previous CPAC, I think it was like this time last year, I think it was, the Youth Justice Service brought a report to CPAC to talk about the children in care and those involved in the youth justice system. And there was a few recommendations that came out from that meeting. I'm sure many of you would have been there. But essentially, the Youth Justice Service was asked to produce an annual report for CPAC on the outcomes for children in care, supported by YJS with a targeted approach. We was asked to do a bit more of a deep dive on the children in care cases over a longer period of time to see the trends with the view to improve outcomes, findings to be presented in the annual progress report, which we've got today, which you've seen in your reports. The Youth Justice Service to attend CPAC biannually, providing an overview of data, interventions, outcomes and impact. The children in care to remain a priority for the youth justice in our annual youth justice plan, which it is included. So we've got our new 3-year plan, which was approved by our board last year. And we've got a 3-year plan, which children in care is part of one of the priorities. And then lastly, to
Matt,
focus.
just so you know, your slides aren't moving.
Oh. Are you on the recommendations?
No, we're still on the front, the slide.
Oh,
slide 1.
That's so weird. Let me stop. Shit. It wasn't Slasho. I don't know why. Yeah, it wasn't Slasho. I will start it again. Hold on 1 second. Can everybody see that now? Can you see the recommendations?
No, we can't. Do you want me to try and share it from my screen?
If you can, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
This is what happens when you get the graveyard shift and the technology starts to let us down.
Best till last comes to mind, Matt.
That's fine.
It's all been a bit graveyard shift with the technology, really.
That should be showing now, is it?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I was talking through these points. I got onto the fourth point there, and I'm just going to go into the last one. And so the last one was just about a further focus on community intervention plans for the children in care children. So all of this was discussed in the, last year, as we said, and I will talk through some of these points throughout the presentation today. Next slide, please.
Well, I was going to say we're going to have to go to somebody else. You got there, Jackie.
So
is it not
just,
showing?
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah,
It is now.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a bit slow. So this is just a quick summary, really, of a snapshot from the 20th of March of the children in care cohort within Youth Justice Service. As a point in time, the Youth Justice Service had 68 children involved in the youth justice system. 15 of those children had an EHCP plan. 17 of those children are currently on currently is a child in care, which equates to around 25% of the cohort. 10%, 10 of these children, 10 of the 17 were actually Haringey children in care. And 3 of those other children were children placed in the borough by another local authority, which the Youth Justice Service was taking care of. 3 of those children in care are also on remand in custody, because I'm not sure if you are aware, but if a child is remanded into local authority, so is remanded into youth detention accommodation, they automatically get living care. So they automatically get children in care status. And Haringey are caretaking 7 cases across different local authorities, and there's a little bit of a breakdown there of the different types, the different local authorities that Haringey is caretaking on behalf of. Next slide, please. So this is a bit more of a of an analysis, really, of the annual throughput from the Youth Justice Service. So over a year period, the Youth Justice Service had 196 children on different disposals since April up until March this year. 43 were children in care at some point over this period. And I think it's very important for us to understand that this is quite transient, depending on how the child became a looked after child. But essentially, of the 43, 32 were a Haringey looked after child at some point. Of these children, 14, which equates to around 33%, were in youth detention accommodation, on remand, or sentenced at some point during that period. And 8 were placed elsewhere out of the borough. So you've got a breakdown there of where the children were placed, which quite predominantly in and around east and north central London, and then it kind of goes out towards Hertfordshire, Reading, Birmingham, and we've got 1 child in secure at the moment in Durham. 11, which equates to around 26%, were placed in Haringey by other boroughs. And again, you've got a breakdown there of the different local authorities that placed their children in Haringey. Of all of the children of the 43 children that was a child in care, 23, which equates to 12%, had an EHCP plan, and it's something that we monitor. This is a graphic that we produced last year, actually, and what we did was to measure the children in care population against the non-children in care population within the youth justice system. So this database really includes all of the children with an outcome since April last year, and that has been assessed through the Youth Justice Service, and it compares both of the cohorts. So those highlighted in red essentially have slightly of a poorer outcome. Now, there wasn't much shift from last year when we did this data, but ultimately, when you look at the outcomes for children, especially in the criminal justice system, and those that have compounding issues in terms of being in care. Predominantly, one would assume that some of these outcomes would always be kind of poorer as well. I guess some of the ones that actually stand out here would be around mental health and health support. So you could see some of the indicators in there around mental health is much higher than those that are non-children in care population. It's, alongside the breach rate, those children that really struggle to comply with their orders and their disposals is much higher for children in care population. And those, what we found as well in terms of offences, the types of offences, robbery offences and violent offences are the ones that have the higher percentage marks against those in the children in care population against the non-children in care population. So what it starts to do is starts to give us a little bit of picture and really bit more of an understanding around our children in care within the criminal justice system. And what we do know is that once at the point of being a child in care, they're more likely from a younger age to start to get involved in the criminal justice system. So as you can see from the graphic there, the average age for a child to come into contact with the criminal justice system through an out-of-court disposal is 13 years and 1 month. And the average age of first conviction is 14 years and 6 months. So it almost is like a year difference to the non-children in care population. Now, with this, within the Youth Justice Service, we have a number of different resources that we can support children with, whether they're in care or not, as part of our multi-agency support that we have. So all children would be supported and assessed by our CAMS nurse, a speech and language therapist. We have substance misuse supports. Every child that is a child in care, we give them well-being packs, which focuses on their health, which they get to ensure that they don't have to spend some of their own money on, but they get like a health pack that we give them as soon as they kind of get introduced to the youth justice system. They get an education support. They attend a number of different workshops, and they have additional contacts when placed at a borough, which I will kind of come on to in the following slides. So the key outcomes here really is really just looking at the targets that were set last year in regards to being ambitious really in trying to ensure that we really focus on the children in care outcomes and try to improve them. Essentially, we had an outcome and a target to reduce those with education training and employment concerns to 80%. The previous year was 90%. So there's a 10% difference there. We really wanted to really improve this. At the latest figure shows that we are at 87%. We want to reduce those with substance misuse concerns to 75%. Previous year was 90%. This year it is 78%. We want to reduce those with high risk of serious harm to others to 23%. Previous year was 28%. This year is 26%. Wanted to reduce those with higher risk of safety and well-being to 56%. Previous year was 66%. This year is at 61%. The one that really stands out that is which is a bit of a struggle that we really not met the target on is around reducing those that breached and didn't comply with the orders and then essentially got returned back to court at some point during their disposal. So intervention. So this was we wanted to reduce it to 31%, which is very ambitious. Previous year was 46%. This year it's actually increased to 54%. Next slide, please. And I think it's important to understand some of the context and the key challenges for the Youth Justice Service and the partnership, really. So a few points here. The children's legal status can fluctuate between a child in need child protection and child in care, or they become a child in care if placed in youth detention accommodation on remand. So it's very transient and quite difficult to some children can go straight from having nothing straight to a child in care, and some can actually go from from a sin to a CP into a child in care, but this does fluctuate depending on the circumstance for the child. The percentage of children placed in care within the borough are actually really small, which means that only a small selection of children are receiving local services. So when we have professional networks, we have all of the services that are available locally that can build relational working relationships with these children. Quite often it could be difficult to maintain when children are being placed out of borough. Youth justice, social care and SEND responsibilities are all different when a child are placed in care out of borough. So some of the examples being is that if a child is placed out of borough, the SEND responsibilities are then transferred over to the local authority receiving the child to take full responsibility over that child. And it's transferred, and it's just a straight transfer. Whereas Youth Justice Service has a little bit of a leeway where if, for instance, a child is local, for instance, in a local borough local authority, just say, for instance, Islington or Enfield, we can have jurisdiction to say, actually, we want to still hold full responsibility for that child and not transfer that case over to that local authority, because we have the relationships. The child knows us, and we try to have that trusted relationship, and we do that more often or not. However, when a child is placed much more out of borough and it's difficult to maintain that relationship, the Youth Justice Services transfer the responsibilities for that Youth Justice Service in the host local authority to caretake the case on our behalf. Whereas Children's Social Care will always be the lead agency for them and don't transfer if it's a child in care. So it's very differences in terms of responsibilities and understanding that, and it's so important. This is why the partnership is so important when working with this cohort. The Youth Justice Service are reliant sometimes on host boroughs to carry out YJS assessments if the child is not known to having a Youth Justice Service prior to the original offence. So you can quite often have a child already placed out of borough that has committed an offence. If that happens and they get a referral order, our protocols means that it's the respective Youth Justice Services to complete the initial assessments, which then once if they do move, then we then have to obtain all of that information, and information can kind of get lost through that process, which isn't a helpful process. There are frequent changes of placements or being placed far away, which can impact on the relational work with the child by the professional network. So suitability of placements and areas and location can sometimes not match with the needs and diversity of the child, especially when you've got a child being placed in, towards Scotland and those kind of areas, and actually it might not meet their needs in terms of the location and what's on offer for that child in terms of how they can connect with that neighborhood and local resources. And then strategy meetings impacted when professionals don't attend or refuse due to different interpretation of risk or different practices across different areas, e.g. borough command units and BCUs. Quite often, this is with our police colleagues, we have a number of different challenging conversations, which I know Dion in the room is aware of, which we do bring to MACE when children are in care, and we are having to have strategy meetings for missing children, and there's different interpretations of risks, and there's a lot of challenges that need to happen to ensure that the children get that support. So just moving on really in terms of what are we doing about this? So this is a bit of an update in terms of the work plan and ongoing work. So there's new improvement targets were set to improve the outcomes for our children in care cohort, and these are being published in our strategic youth justice plan. There's ongoing targeted work aimed at our children in care cohort. Last year, we had a big focus on our MOPAC disproportionality mentoring project, which focused on our children in care cohort, and also our pilot around social prescribing models, and actually really doing some innovative work with children placed in some boroughs like Birmingham and other places where we wanted to really focus on social prescribing. As I said, all children in care will get wellbeing packs. We are really have big aspirations to increase children in care within our cohort to get AQA achievements, and looking at how they can do that within the service. We have aspirations to create a children in care residential in the spring, which is now in the summer, which we're still focusing and looking at how we can do to give the children in care cohort, whether they're placed in Haringey or not, an opportunity to engage in stuff that they may have never done before. Increase the understanding and the experience of stop and search for children in care. And since last year, there's been a development of a task and finish group that I lead on, which has representation from the Youth Justice Service, safeguarding teams within social care, SEND education, with the aim to share the children in care data, understanding some of the barriers and identifying some of the opportunities to change practices in order to improve the outcomes for children. Next slide, please. Some of the work that the Task and Finish group have been working on in the background for over a year now, and some of the key reflections and actions. So one of the first things we did was to review the Youth Justice Service and Children and Young People Services joint protocol. So this was reviewed with all of the kind of key heads of service and service managers across the different services, and this was updated in line with the new and relevant legislations and practices. The Children and Young People Service audit tool was amended to capture Youth Justice Service involvement and children's lived experiences in youth detention accommodation. We identified that there was a gap in terms of the quality assurance auditing tool, and we wanted to make sure that any child that was in care that also had youth justice involvement, that lived experience was captured, and we now have that embedded in the template, which is really great. The Young Adult Service completed a mini self-assessment audit on the joint cases with the Youth Justice Services to look at working practices and the outcomes for children, which was a really good, useful opportunity to look at some of the practices and make some tweaks to some of those practices, which is now embedded, which is providing much more of an oversight for those children. Youth Justice Children in Care data is shared with children's services and SEND management teams on a monthly and quarterly basis. So this is to ensure that the key cohort is up to date on both of in terms of all of the systems, and to ensure that this specific cohort keeps on the minds of all of the key agencies. Youth Justice Service completed a learning review of a child that was remanded into the local authority accommodation and became a child in care. And that report was done and met with the heads of the respective heads of services in children's social care to look at the recommendations and the working practices in regards to that specific case. There's a constant review of the reduction, so the reducing of criminalisation of looked after children and care leavers protocol into practice. So this is something that some of the YAS team lead on, and also Youth Justice are involved in the wider Pan-London work that is going into this, and we're just looking at how we're going to be embedding this into practice locally and what this looks like to make sure that social workers and other services are really aware of this protocol. So we've been reviewing the support for children when placed out of borough that are in need of education support via our virtual schools. So again, really linking up and triangulating all of the information to ensure that no child is being missed and kind of slips through the net. Youth Justice Service, really thinking about how we share assessments and plans with our children and social care colleagues. So there's been a number of different initiatives and plans in place to share information, ensure that respective systems are updated with the respective assessments and plans. So we've been also been focusing on reviewing the current children in care cohort and ensuring that relevant EHCPs have been completed and reviewed, including those out of borough. So this has been, again, linking into the work and triangulation, ensuring that every single child is ensuring that if they do have an EHCP, that these are updated within the timescales that they should be. And lastly, the Youth Justice Service has completed the top 20 most prolific offenders audit report. And there's currently, there will be like a mini roadshow in terms of sharing the findings from that report, because what we're looking at is the early lived experiences and how children become into contact with the criminal justice system, and looking at recommendations across the partnership so we can continue to mobilize and change work. Lastly here, Youth Justice Service had an inspection and this was concluded with the report in March. We had the call in November and it was finalized really in March in terms of the report. Overall grading was good with outstanding features. And this is a quote from the actual inspection report, which I'll quickly just read out, which is a direct link to the work that we're talking about today. So the Youth Justice Service and Children's Services had effective strategic and operational relationships with an understanding of the differing roles and responsibilities. Inspectors saw examples of collaborative work to support children and families, as well as the effective challenge and escalations where required. So I just think everything that we've been speaking about today, inspectors also ratified that really in terms of what they saw and the work that we're really trying to do with this complex but good cohort that we're trying to improve outcomes for. Thank you.
I think that was a really, really helpful report, very, very informative, and I can see the hands are up. So I think George was first and Ibrahim. Oh, sorry. Before we did this, I was supposed to ask Naz to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Jackie, for that presentation. Just before we go to questions, as you know, we're getting some static feedback on the microphones. I'm informed that this is because people are on Teams are leaving their microphones on. So if you could please switch your microphones off when you're not speaking, and that goes for everyone on Teams. Thank you.
That was a public service announcement. Right. George and Ibrahim.
Matthew, for that really detailed report, and it's fantastic feedback at the end as well. It's not a question, I don't think, it's just a clarification point on slide 3 around the current CIC numbers. That last point where we said we're caretaking 7 cases, is that what we were sort of discussing earlier about reciprocal arrangements, if we're caretaking cases, or what does that mean?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So these are children that are being placed in the local authority in supported accommodations by another local authority. So it's essentially a supported accommodation that has accepted this child to be placed here, and then by that so when that happens, then quite often the home local authority or youth justice service asks us to caretake the case on their behalf.
Just to add, this is an arrangement within the Youth Justice Service only. It's not available to all children in care. It's this specific cohort.
Ibrahim?
But just for time, 'cause I know we're running out of time, to say that last slide is, that last quote is quite reassuring. Effective challenge and escalation were required, and there are examples of that actually in the report that you gave. So hats off to the entire team. It's a real good selling point of the delivery that's been happening. So well done to all involved. It's a very hard bit of work, a lot of family work in this area of the local authority. So I've got a lot of time for what you guys do. I've got a question regarding missing children, which has been something that's been spoken about for a very long time now, and not here, but just more broadly. I think it's quite frustrating to hear that this conversation about risk is still ongoing in terms of different BCUs having a different understanding of what risk is. And I was wondering if there's been any sort of concerted effort to sit down with MOPAC and to bash heads together the Met to say, surely we can't still be talking about this in 2025, where one BCU area has a more holistic understanding of what risk is, and other BCU areas are popping it off, essentially. I know in one of the work plans, there is some sort of project we are looking at, and we've got a clear relationship with MOPAC. But just more broadly, I don't know if there's something that can be raised at a wider level, with the GLA, with the Met, because it's quite harmful, really, if you haven't spent all that time and resource going into bat for people who really don't really need to be batted for, might be quite apparent in that there's an element of risk. And the second question I had was, it would be great to see some sort of, I mean, the targets and finishing grids and the reflections and actions are quite exciting. I'm particularly interested in the reducing criminalisation. It might be an idea, and again, if it's an inappropriate idea, if it's unreasonable, if it's onerous, so you can just knock it off. But this is sort of drag waiting for the next new report that's due, in terms of how these things are planned, in terms of progressing them, just more broadly. It's interesting to see how that's going, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what reason, that kind of thing. So a broader point. But thank you for the point.
Do you want me to come in and answer question?
I was just
Answer now?
about to say,
Yep.
do you want to reply now? Yes, because that was quite.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So the first point, it is extremely frustrating in terms of speaking with other BCUs to really fight for children in terms of ensuring that they are getting the respective services that they should be, especially when they should be reported missing, and have that kind of wraparound support. This has been raised via MACE, and it's been raised hopefully via that route there. But quite specific, it's really specific when we have these challenging conversations. So for instance, if you have a child that is has a warrant out for their arrest, for instance, but then is also missing, those two things can still be okay in terms of for a child. Quite often when that happens, the police do say that because the child has a warrant out for their arrest, they can't report them missing. And this is specific BCUs. Different BCUs have different processes. And it's only of recent we're starting to learn that the different BCUs have these different processes, which would then get into challenge. So we do have a good relationship with our police colleagues in our in the missing team police. And they support us in terms of challenging their counterparts in the other BCU as well to ensure that this does happen. But it is an ongoing conversation, and it can be a battle at times, but it's something that we are trying to work with our colleagues, with the police, to try to eradicate so that this doesn't keep happening. But it has happened on a number of occasions. The second point, which I think I got because of it was a bit muffled. It was something around the criminalization protocol, and I think you said something along the lines that you'd like for it to come back to this group to understand how it's progressed. Was that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yep, happy to do that, and we could probably do that jointly with our children's social care colleagues as well, because this is a partnership arrangement, and this is something that we work with in collaboration with. So happy to bring that point back.
I think it was Anna. I think you were next.
Yes. Thank you, Matthew, and congratulations to you and your team for the inspection outcome. So if I've understood correctly, the percentage of children supported by the Youth Justice Service that are placed in the borough is small. And essentially, if children that used to be in the council's care are placed relatively far away from Haringey, usually the decision is to relinquish responsibility over those children. But if they're placed relatively nearby in neighbouring boroughs, the council would retain responsibility. I was wondering, for those children, what mechanisms are in place to continue to follow those children, to monitor their progress, and to make sure that the council's responsibilities towards those children are being met? Because I can see the risk that once the child is no longer in contact with local services, you could sort of lose lose sight of the progress that child is making.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and and we've been really clear locally how we wanted to ensure that just because a child is no longer within the service or within the local authority, that they don't get this, don't get the oversight and support. What we didn't want is that situation to continue in happening, because it has happened, in the past in terms of practices in other local authorities that I've worked in as well, kind of like that out of mind. We were 100% did not want this to happen, and so we've made a local decision to ensure that any child that is in within London local authorities, we will continue to do home visits with where the child is at. We will continue to have oversight over their assessments and their plans, and work with the partnership to ensure that they are getting the right services, and also quite often escalating issues with other youth justice services if they are not supporting the child as we would deem fit as well. So it is something that we are really conscious of. Like, as I've said, it is something within our priority in our strategic plan, and it's something operationally that we do have oversight on a monthly basis of all of our children who are out of borough but are local, that we continue to do home visits, have up-to-date assessments and plans, and to also ensure that we're having contact with the child quite often, and not just kind of leaving it to other local authorities to manage on our behalf.
Have we got any more questions before we sort of wrap this up? Did Lottie, was that hand? All right. Well, I just wanted to say, I think we started off by saying that one of the reasons for this was because perhaps in this scrutinising this area, we don't often see how complex it is, but I hope colleagues, particularly from scrutiny, got a flavour of just how detailed this is, just this report alone, and all the dimensions of this small, tiny cohort, but huge number of staff wrapped round, and as usual with a tiny cohort, a huge cost relative attached to it, because they're such a needy group. And I'm waiting with interest to see this next updated 20 prolific offenders, and wondering if it isn't telling us much of the same stuff we knew from the earlier report, and therefore the importance of early intervention, speech and language, and all the other things. And go on our hobby horse.
Just to say that, there are different cohorts of children and young people that you've heard today, and this particular cohort fills my heart with complete sadness, because it's evidence of sort of systems failing, really. And we've lost them. So yeah. What can we say?
But I do want to say a huge congratulations from all of us to the service for getting such a great report. So I think we should give you a big round of applause. And then, because we're always going to end on a high note, Anne and Dion, you're down to your verbal report on the Ofsted visit. And we'll give you exactly 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to go home.
Over to Dion. That's 2 seconds taken up.
So I think we don't like to do things by halves, and we just like to continue to build and build. So we weren't at all phased on the 11th of February. I think it was the 11th of February when Ofsted made not one but 2 calls to us to say that they were coming to look at different parts of our service, one of which was for them to undertake a focused visit. And so that particular focus visit was to look at the arrangements that the local authority has in place, identifying and responding to the children's needs for permanence, which from the 2023 full children's inspection was the area that they felt needed some work, with the other areas having been deemed to be good. So very quickly, methodology was that they looked through children's records, had discussions with social workers. They wanted very little to do with managers at this time, but they wanted really to look at the performance and how do we know and what are the quality assurance processes that we have. And there were initial discussions with senior leaders because, again, it speaks to that assurance. So the headline findings were that they were impressed with the service improvement that had been seen since 2023 inspection, and that the tracking and quality assurance systems have improved oversight of practice and performance, and that leaders have a good understanding of their services and the impact that this has for children and young people locally. They were really impressed with our social workers and spoke very, very positively about the relationships that they build with children and the supportive frontline managers who are helping them to do their work. So they felt that we as an authority know ourselves well, and we understand the need for continuous improvement. They only gave us one area that they want us to keep building on, which is that consistency in terms of the supervision across all of the services. That they found that children making good progress, focus on education, children's health needs are a priority, children are supported, developing trusted relationships with social workers, have good care plans, and they spoke so highly of the life story work that they have seen. So in essence, we couldn't be prouder of how our social workers represented the work that they do with our children in care and care leavers, the permanency arrangements, the permanency planning processes that we have in place that are really effective. I think it's fair to say that our inspectors from Ofsted were assured on this visit. If there's anything that you want to add.
So on that very positive note, we close the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming during the Easter holidays when we're all on holiday in our heads. And thank you very much. And I'll see you on Thursday. That is, if you're in the Labour group. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Oh, I need that now. Yes.